Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
Whenever you see a pro footballer in a commercial or posing for a picture with any given product, doesn't matter what it is, you can assume that that is the product of an endorsement deal. In other words, they were paid to promote a product and represent it in a positive light. In the case of football boots, we see pro footballers with endorsement deals all the time, especially when you're talking about the biggest names. But what I want to talk about in today's video is 5 times some really big name footballers would not wear the football boots that they are paid to wear. Robin Van Persie wore Adidas Predators for a large chunk of his career. As long as it had a leather upper, that's something that he seemed to be into. But as the Predator kind of changed and evolved over the years, his preferences didn't evolve with them. One of the earliest examples of Van Persie's particular taste in football boots can be seen in his custom Adidas Predator X, which granted, the Pred X is not a well-loved Predator model looking back on its entire history. Nonetheless, instead of the retail burrito style tongue, which a lot of people really didn't like, his boots have a central tongue and are standard lacing setup, making it much more like the Predator models that came before it, rather than the more modern take on the Predator series that Adidas was pushing at retail with the Predator X. He wore the Predator LZ that had a custom sole plate and stud pattern that was actually the old Predator layout with the bladed studs, rather than the more kind of square shaped Adizero style studs that we see on pretty much everything from Adidas at this point. He then made the switch from the Predator series into the F50 Adizero line, where he customized absolutely everything. The upper and the colorways had the appearance of an F50 Adizero, but nothing about them was the same as the retail version you could buy. The upper was entirely made out of leather, and we saw a couple different custom variations of that over several generations of F50, and the sole plate and stud pattern was taken directly from the discontinued for several years Predator Adi Power, which was just one of the coolest mashups that we've ever seen. This is not something that Adidas necessarily tried to hide, but it is something that's really interesting that they were paying him to represent the Adidas brand, but clearly this is a player that was uninterested in wearing any of their current inline product. Now, aside from his boots being formed around a custom last, meaning that they are formed to the exact shape of his feet, which I think is pretty clear to see based on images of his boots versus the retail versions of different generations of Mercurials over the years. But obviously, Cristiano Ronaldo is the most important Nike Mercurial athlete the brand has ever seen. There's a reason why he signed to a lifetime contract with Nike. And the modification that he made that really stands out, and the reason why he's in this video, wasn't really that significant, but it was seen by absolutely everybody, even if you didn't know that much about football boots. And it came in 2014 for the World Cup when Nike launched the Mercurial Superfly 4. Obviously, it was the return of the Superfly, something that people were very excited about, and it was the introduction of these Flyknit uppers with a mid-cut design. Emphasis on the mid-cut aspect because that's what people were going crazy about. However, when Cristiano Ronaldo made his on-pitch debut in this new Superfly 4, his boots did not have a mid-cut collar. Instead, they had a very clearly fully custom low-cut, mid-cut collar that was nothing like the retail version. And we never really got an answer from Cristiano Ronaldo or Nike as to why he was doing this. I can only assume at the time, especially going into a World Cup with a brand new pair of boots, it was a personal request based on preference and general comfort. He had never worn mid-cut football boots up until that point in his career. Nobody really had, so I can understand why he perhaps didn't want to do it, if there's some kind of a superstition thing even, who really knows. I'm assuming also because he tapes his ankle, the collar maybe was a little bit too tight for him, but he did this for the entire generation of Superfly 4 in pretty much every colorway he had. But what's kind of interesting is moving forward, the Superfly would continue to be mid-cut, and from Superfly 5 onward, he appeared to wear what looks to be very similar to the retail collar. So it was only a one generation thing, but it's something that was super noticeable and extremely interesting because he was really the only player from Nike, and by far the most important one, who had this modification. If you've been paying attention to football boots over the last 2 years, then you know the impact that Neymar has had on the industry and how much the average consumer cares about which boots he wears, as made evident by his gigantic brand switch from Nike to Puma, where pretty much overnight, Puma gained a gigantic fan base and a much bigger part of the market. Tons of people who would never consider buying a pair of Puma football boots were now very interested in the Puma brand. And the reason why Neymar's influence is even more interesting is because he does seem to be pretty picky when it comes to his football boots. Even in his short period with Puma so far, when he debuted in the Puma King Platinum, he didn't actually use the retail sole plate and stud pattern. He had something that was completely different and honestly a lot more traditional. However, the reason why he's in this video is not because of his time with Puma, it's instead because of his time with Nike, specifically in regards to the Nike Hypervenom Phantom series, where he's been signed with the Nike brand for a long time, wearing Mercurials very early on. But in 2011, when Nike launched the Hypervenom Phantom 1, they chose Neymar to basically be the face of that line. And the Hypervenom Phantom 1 went on to be wildly successful. Neymar wore it for the most part. You can find images of him using a custom Tiempo sole plate on his Hypervenom Phantom 1, so that is somewhat of a modification, but as far as the upper is concerned, it looked to be pretty close to the retail version. Where the controversy comes in is with the Hypervenom Phantom 2, which was a complete redesign over the original, still featuring a Nike skin upper, although a material that was much more plasticky and honestly one of the worst uppers ever to come out of the Nike brand. And of course the introduction of a mid-cut collar, relating it to the Magista and Mercurial series in the Obra and the Superfly, which obviously saw huge success because of that mid-cut design. In all of the marketing material, Neymar would be holding and wearing this mid-cut Hypervenom Phantom 2, but what he would actually play in pretty early on, because he did make his original debut in this boot wearing the mid-cut version, but he quickly would switch into a low-cut version, which at the time was called the Hypervenom Finish. But instead of being a retail Hypervenom Finish or something even close to the retail version, his was basically a custom Mercurial Vapor 10 made to look as much like a Hypervenom Finish as Nike could possibly make them look. Completely different upper, completely different sole plate and stud pattern, but graphics that would hopefully trick the average consumer into believing that Neymar was actually wearing the boots that Nike were showing in all of their marketing material. It got to the point, and I'm not sure if this is something that was agreed upon between Neymar and Nike, but randomly Neymar would break out a pair of Mercurial Vapor 10s and wear those instead of the Hypervenoms that at the time he was getting signature colors in. He would quickly switch back into his custom Hypervenoms, but it was just really interesting to see what was pretty clearly a rift between Nike and Neymar in regards to the boots that he was using and the boots that he was endorsing. Nonetheless, it got to the point where Nike just decided to switch him back into the Mercurials, and from there really wasn't much in the way of drama. It was super interesting to see Neymar return from one of his many injuries and sticking to the AG Pro stud pattern rather than wearing the FG stud pattern on his Mercurials. So he's always been a player that wants something a little bit different, but obviously now that he's with Puma, it's a little bit of a different story, and hopefully he gets some boots that are a little bit more tailored to his liking. If you know your football boots, then you know that Messi is one of those guys that endorses one boot and wears another. This has been the case for a very long time, especially in the Messi signature line days, where Adidas has gone with this plus and 0.1 variation of their football boot. Messi always posing with the plus, sometimes that plus model even being laceless, and then always wearing some custom take on the 0.1 variation. And there are examples of him playing in the plus model once or twice in each generation, but in general, he's never really worn the football boot that he would be headlining for Adidas. What is kind of interesting though is that just like Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi does have a lifetime contract with the three stripes, and they recently discontinued what was more or less his own signature line in the Nemesis series and switched him into the much more popular X Speed Flow line, which I think a lot of us have been screaming for a very long time. To not have Messi in your most popular line of football boots just doesn't make a lot of sense. And from what we can tell right now, based on not just the marketing material, but what Messi himself is actually wearing, he's wearing something that is at the very least remotely similar to that of the retail Speedflow 0.1, which isn't really that surprising because they're excellent football boots. However, the reason why Messi is being featured in this video is because of his days endorsing the Adidas F50 Tune-It series, which for those that are unfamiliar, was a concept by Adidas where the upper, the sole plate, and the studs were all interchangeable. So you could change the upper from synthetic to leather to laceless to whatever different variation that they had on offer, and you could change the stud pattern between FG, hard ground, and soft ground studs, even combining elements from all the different stud types to create your own custom stud pattern. It's a really cool idea and something that they tried to reintroduce with the Adidas Glitch that wasn't overly successful. And while it's a great concept, the execution wasn't that great because the F50 Tune-It series was their speed line competing against the Mercurial, but the boots weighed more than a pair of Copa Mundials and were bulky and uncomfortable and just honestly not very good. I know a lot of people probably did like them back in the day, but there's a reason why that concept has come and gone. With that said, Messi being one of the main faces of the F50 Tune-It series, you would expect him to wear a pair of F50 Tune-Its, but instead he wore the takedown model, the F30, and of course had his own custom variation with the sole plate and stud pattern. Different generations of F50 Tune-Its all had different custom takes, but in general, Messi was wearing a takedown model of the top end version of the football boot that he was endorsing and getting signature colors in. It's one thing for a pro to opt for a custom take on the football boot they're endorsing, but it's another thing entirely for a pro, especially to Messi's caliber, opting to wear the cheaper version of the football boot that he's endorsing. I genuinely don't think we'll ever see anything like that again. In 2014, Adidas launched the 11 Pro 2, which was a decent pair of football boots, but I don't think it's the greatest time in the history of Adidas football boots, at least as it relates to leather ones. Instead of being kangaroo leather, they were Taurus leather, which was basically calfskin with a fancy name that Adidas had given to kind of trick people into cheapening the quality of their boots without anybody noticing. I noticed, Adidas, you're not getting anything past me. It was reinforced by memory foam inserts and in general was a pretty plain Jane pair of football boots. Nonetheless, it's one that Toni Kroos would take a liking to, mainly in regards to how they look, because he wore a custom variation anyways, which I have to imagine features a full kangaroo leather upper, definitely leather based on the pictures we can see, and a sole plate end stud pattern that would be taken from past Adipure, possibly even Predator models with that classic bladed TRX stud pattern. And since then, he hasn't switched his boots even once. Like, not even a different colorway. Same boots, same colors for the last 8 years. There is no other modern day pro footballer that's done this. And similar to the Van Persie situation, I have to imagine that there's some kind of an agreement in Kroos and Adidas cooperating in providing him with these custom football boots over the last 8 years. Although it must be said that unlike a lot of pros who seem to play in newer football boots more regularly, especially the younger generation, Kroos is a player based on images that we can see that wears the exact same boots basically until they're ready for the garbage. So it's not only cool to see him wearing the same boots for such a long time, but he's kind of like the average Sunday League player where he has his one pair of boots that he plays in until they're broken, at which point he replaces them with the exact same pair and never really questions which football boots he's going to be playing in his next match. There have been spottings of him training in different boots like once or twice over the last 8 years, but other than that, we've never actually seen him deviate from this custom 11 Pro 2, which in my opinion is one of the coolest things in football boots.